Hi, I'm Paul.
And I'm Rebecca.
And we explore old abandoned railways.
And stuff.
And other stuff.
Bits and pieces.
Bits and pieces. Today we're exploring the abandoned railway that is the Weymouth to Portland branch, and then on into Portland because it has a lot of very old railways. Today's video is also sponsored by the good people at Pouch.
More on that later on.
Indeed. You can check out all the links in the description below. But for the meantime, let's head to Portland and tell you some really quite quirky stories. Not this abandoned railway though, is it?
It is abandoned, but not the one we're doing today.
No, this is the one that went down from Weymouth to Weymouth Harbour. We're going to do one that was almost parallel. In fact, our first abandoned station is just behind us in McDonald's.
Ooh.
So we've just left Weymouth, as we said. Now Weymouth, the railways reached there in 1857, and the original plan was to link up with Portland, the Isle of Portland, because there was a lot of old quarries on there, and it was deemed it would be perfect for the freight side of the railways. But it didn't happen, and it took another 7 or 8 years for them to link up with Weymouth and Portland Railway. But they did in 1865, as some of the signs depict there, 100 years of the railway along here. So this is the first part of today's journey, the Weymouth and Portland Railway. Rodwell marks 1,000 metres since the start of the journey up at Westerham, and again, not much of a halt, more like a mainline station.
It's even got 2 platforms, one on each side, all nicely done. Hold on, this one's brick, that one's stone.
Yeah, maybe a later addition perhaps. Sandersfoot Castle Halt, we're heading downhill significantly, and we couldn't find Sandersfoot Castle Halt. Nope. And then all of a sudden we saw this, open 1932, which explains why it's not like the others, which were opened 20 years previously.
Yeah, it's a wooden one.
So this is now Wick Regis Halt that we're looking for, and we're pretty sure it's another wooden one because we've seen a bit old picture online from like 20 years ago, and we're almost sure it's somewhere in that hedge because there was a lovely sign and the old platform was there and you could see it all, but now it's just covered in gorse and bramble. Anyway, so we're going to head towards Chisel Beach, Portland. Now Portland is an island apart from the fact that Chisel Beach connects it. Chisel Beach is fascinating, natural phenomena of shingle, stones, all sorts, 18 miles long, and it goes all the way up the Dorset Jurassic coast. But that is what makes Portland an island, or doesn't make Portland an island, the fact that Chisel Beach exists. So ahead of us now is the beautiful Chisel Beach. I remember coming here as a kid, 18 miles of stone separating itself from the inland. Now behind us just there would have been the very famous Weymouth and Pouch Railway.
Pouch? Did you just say Pouch?
Yeah, let me just check my notes. Yeah, Weymouth and Pouch Railway, built 1865, mixed gauge, so it could take standard gauge and broad gauge railway trains to Portland.
Well, as in Pouch, as in the free desktop browser extension that automatically pops up when you're shopping and gives you the best discount codes.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit odd, doesn't it, that a desktop browser extension would build such an important link to the island.
Yeah,
but nevertheless it did.
Okay, well what else did Pouch build apart from railways?
Well, funny you should say that, because the other day I was looking at Mountain Warehouse website, and I found myself an amazing deal, a 3-in-1 waterproof coat, and when I got to the checkout area that you get to, Pouch automatically popped up. Now it found me a discount code and it applied it, and even though it was in the sale, it still saved me a further £13.50.
Whoa.
Which is about 15% off. It's amazing.
And I also heard that they actually work on over 3,000 UK websites.
Such as Game, eBay, Tesco's, Argos and so many more. And here is another new thing that Pouch do. Guess what it is? I'm not even going to let you guess. They build tunnels as well as railways and viaducts.
You what?
Combine that with the fact that they have now launched pouch points. So if there are no live codes available at the time when you're shopping, you can still earn points from participating retailers, which can be redeemed for gift cards and such.
Oh, cool. Well, pouch only takes a couple of clicks to install, and make sure you pin it to your browser.
So get pouch for free right now by clicking in the doobly-doo below. Sorry, I've stolen your line because you always say that. And you too can save a bunch of money when you shop online at no cost to you whatsoever. Right, so that's most of the Weymouth and Weymouth and Portland. Weymouth and Portland railway done, and now we're going to come to more of the, let's call them exciting railways, because it's all the old railways, what came before the 1865 railway, and that's what I've really got quite passionate about in terms of the old tramways. And there's so many up on the top of Portland, including the extension to the Weymouth and Portland railway. So we're walking up one of the inclines, one of the very early railways before locomotives and steam engines that were moving, and we're looking for a specific pathway. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but first of all we're looking for the extension to the Weymouth and Portland branch. We're looking for the Eastern and Church Hope Railway. So in 1866 there were more proposals to take this line from Portland, its current terminus, a bit further, and they were kind of like the east side of the island, which is quite picturesque. But that wouldn't happen for another 34 years. That line wasn't built around that side of the island until 1900. So what happened there? What happened there, Rebecca?
I don't know. What did happen there?
Well, let's talk about that now.
Okay.
So when we eventually get to Easton, we'll note that it's the terminus of that line, and it kind of sits itself right in the middle of the Isle of Portland. But if you look at an OS map, you'll note that it's 100 metres or 110 metres above sea level, but it's only 2 kilometres or so from Portland Station, which is down at pretty much sea level, give or take. So how did they traverse 100 metres in just 2 kilometres? Well, we instead need to head south from Easton to start losing some of that that altitude. Is that the right word?
Height, yes.
The height.
Altitude, yes.
Yes. Okay. So 1872, the line started to be constructed. At last, we're going to have a railway now to reach the middle of Portland and maybe sort of exploit some of these wonderful quarries that have been here for years. Sorry, back on the hit you on the head. But it stopped straight away. We don't know why. And instead of that, an Admiralty railway was built along the north coast rather effectively and fairly quickly. However, 1888, we're still 12 years from construction of this line, or completion of this line, but all of a sudden, the Eastern and Church Hope Railway think they could utilise the Admiralty Railway, and they do just that. So they then begin building their line once again, 1888. Now don't forget, we're still 12 years away from it being open. So what went wrong there again? So it's fair to say the landscape has changed quite a bit in recent years, or certainly since the closure of the line in 1952. Interesting, that sign said the line closed in 1965, but I'm guessing that's freight, because many of the halts along the original line and Eastern I think closed in 1952. But nevertheless, we can't find the railway. We've just seen a bit come out of Eastern where the station was, round the curve, and it should be down here somewhere, but I feel like we're too high. There is a path down here, but I still feel like we're way too high for the railway. But ahead of us is a beautiful expanse of sea. Goodness me.
That's lovely.
That is just, you never get sort of bored by the sight of the sea.
Maybe you do if you live by it.
Maybe, yeah, that's a very good point. Well, we don't, so here we are. But we found the track bed. So we're heading as if we're going out of Portland.
Choo choo.
Choo choo, along the eastern coast, and it's beautiful. You imagine this is a little train ride, Rebecca, looking out towards the sea there.
That would have been amazing in the day.
It would have been, wouldn't it? And there's all sorts of weird and wonderful activities going along this coastline. People are climbing up the edge, which to our minds is mad. 1888, and we're still 12 years away from the line being opened. So what you've got to remember, I think Portland and the quarries and the stone here was extremely hard. So it basically took them 12 years to build this 5-kilometre railway. 12 years. No tunnels. Yeah. The small viaducts, no tunnels, and they literally spent 12 years blasting at the rock face to create what we're on now, the railway into Easton. So it turns out that if you want to get down from 2 kilometres, you actually need to extend your line to 5 kilometres and go all the way around the outside of the Isle of Portland. Right, so that's the branch railway done, the extension of the branch railway as well. What we want to have a quick look at now is something a lot older than that railway itself. Let's go back to the year 1825, 1826 and have a look at the early quarrying and the early railways, because it's such a fascinating story. We need to head back along the branch up onto the top of Verne. So we're at the top of the Verne now, and here's where the story of the old railways begins. And when I say old, I mean pre-locomotion, a locomotive that moves. So it's 1820 and the island of Portland is exporting 27,000 tonnes per year of stone, and they want to remove the bottleneck. They want to increase that production. Now the bottleneck is getting the stone from up here 100 metres down to sea where the port is. So when we talk about tramways, what exactly do we mean? Tramways could have been anything from bits of wood, planks, stone guided rails, or L-shaped plateways, you name it, any kind of primitive railway that didn't have an exact specification. Now 1820s, as I say, they wanted to remove the bottleneck here, so they decided that actually instead of using horses everywhere, because it was deemed a little bit cruel on the horses, lugging as brakes down some of the old trackways here, they deemed that actually they wanted one of these newfangled tramways, and it was 1826. And I wonder where they got that notion from. I wonder if it was from sort of people like the Haytor tramway over in Dartmoor, who built his own granite railway, or perhaps because for the last 30-40 years they've become very, very commonplace in industry. But anyway, for the time being, a group of merchants, quarrymen from here on the island of Portland decided that they wanted to spend around about £5,000 or £6,000 on one of these newfangled railways. And we showed you a couple of or at least one of the inclines earlier that were built for this early merchants railway, and there's a couple of really cool viewpoints I want to show you. There's some old stonework there. I wonder if that's part of it. Just down there on the floor, look. I wonder if that's part of the old railway system they had here, the tramway system they had. But just across to my left, across the valley here, you can see the lines in the landscape, and you can see where they built them. There's lots of old stonework along here I'm seeing now, which for sure would have been part of a tramway system here, because you can even see the holes in them. So there was quite a few different lines built around here at different times, and the success of that early tramway around here really meant that a lot of other tramways within quarries would then all link up. So you can imagine the prosperity of that business here after 1826, and the success of this tramway, well, is really proved by the fact that it didn't close till 1854. Now they still used horses. I don't really think that they didn't use horses thereafter. They still used them, but what they did do on the inclines is used barrel drums to load up and down the hill, I think on a balanced system, at least on the most of them. Now I'm not going to bore you with the evolution of the tramways here, because it tells a very long and arduous story, but what I do want to show you is one of the most iconic shots in early tramway railway history, which I think is just ahead of me. bit worn out, but that's a trip I've been wanting to make for a very, very long time. Rebecca will be grateful for staying at the top of this incline on this occasion. It's been a long day, so we'll forgive her. All grade, either 2 or grade 1 listed buildings, so they're not going anywhere. I half joked earlier when I was talking about the Haytor granite tramway, a tramway railway made out of stone. And I was trying to find out what they would have used here just by looking at some of the stones. So did they hold the rails in place using pins into granite, and was it like an iron plateway? But I don't think it was. It's certainly on the inclines, because it looks like the bits that have carved out of the stone are just rounded. So I wonder if they just guided the rails down, but it has left us with such a legacy. But yeah, 130 years this tramway lasted, and it outlived some railways that had closed themselves around the country. 1854. So it does show you the success of this railway was perhaps what it was carrying. There was no other means really to get this down there. Of course, passengers went to use the bus, but really, could they do anything for stones? Well, of course they couldn't. So this railway remained. 1954, that's quite staggering in terms of a closure of a tramway. Let's go find Rebecca.
Hello.
Found Rebecca, everybody.
Hi.
It's all good.
I wasn't lost. You didn't throw me off a cliff, honest.
She's still here.
Okay.
It's all good. But that's it for today's video. What a wonderful little explore today.
It has been gorgeous. Bit nippy, but gorgeous.
Bit nippy, but good. Late February. Bit nippy, but utterly wonderful little exploration today. We've learned a lot about the old railways around here and how a quarry tramway outlasted the actual railway itself, which is a bit mad. Big thanks to our sponsor, Pouch. Don't forget to check out the current deals in the description below and the pinned comment. They've now got Pouch points. It costs you nothing, people.
Yep.
So how fast?
Saves you a lot.
Saves you a bunch of money. So if you'd like to help us out, the channel out, you can download that desktop browser extension just by clicking on our link below. And from us, we will bid you farewell and see you next week.
Toodles.